Yes, I'm Laura Willis, and I'm the co-founder of Shine Offline, and I'm here tonight with Anna, who founded it with me at the back. You can mob her later. When Mark asked me to come along and do this event tonight, it got me thinking about my own happiness. And at the moment, I'm pretty happy. I've got a brilliant husband who cooks my dinner every night. I've got two gorgeous children, one of whom woke at 20 to 5 until quite recently, but he stopped doing that now, which is brilliant. And I'm doing work that I really, really love. I enjoy what I do, and there's a lot of purpose in what I do. But a few years ago, I wasn't terribly happy, and I hit an all-time low. I'd always had a bit of a dysfunctional relationship with my email, and whenever the smartphone came in, I totally got the liberation and flexibility that it gave me in my work. I was a freelance PR marketing consultant. But the flip side of that was that I was connected an awful lot of the time, and I felt quite overwhelmed by my devices. And then I became a mum 5 years ago, and when my daughter was born, I had to go back to work really quickly. And it became apparent to me within a couple of months of going back to work that my work-life balance was completely off-kilter. I couldn't do everything anymore, and I had a burnout/breakdown. And when I went to the doctor, and he said, we'll get you some CBT, but in the meantime, I told him I'd practiced some mindfulness in the past. And he said, well, CBT and mindfulness have similar benefits, so maybe revisit that. And I started to meditate on a more regular basis. And the space and pause and clarity that that gave me really shone a light on the fact that it was the relationship with this thing in my hand that was causing an awful lot of my stresses. I just didn't know when to turn it off. So I started to play about with how I used it, and I changed it, and things got better. It was really, really hard because my email was the thing that I was drawn to, and the wolf was at the door. I needed to know that work was going to be constantly coming in, but I was determined, and eventually the benefits started to show themselves, and my well-being improved. And I started to talk to people about what I was doing, and the thing that I found really fascinating was that everybody seemed to have their own take on this. If it wasn't that they were struggling with turning their work email off in the evening or on the weekends, it was that they were looking at Facebook but it made them feel rubbish, or their husband was always on his phone, or they didn't quite know how to put some guidelines in place for their children. And then one day I had a light bulb moment on a commuter train when everyone was on the train around me was on their phones, and I wasn't, and I realised that this was a greater thing, and Anne and I then decided to launch the business. So what we do predominantly at Shine Offline is we go into corporate settings and we work with business teams. We create an environment for people to start to question their relationships with their devices and empower them to recognise that by making some small changes to how they use their technology, it really can enhance their lives rather than overwhelm them. So I'm here tonight to share this thinking with you all. Now, this is the tricky bit. Before we get started, I'm going to invite everyone to Shine Offline, which basically means turn off your phone. Now, if you don't want to turn off your phone, I'm not going to ask you to leave, but if you fancy a break, I think it's about an hour and a quarter. If you want to put it to flight mode or turn it off, if you don't know how to, come up and I'll slap your wrist. We do it in all our workshops, and it's so that we can focus and not be distracted. So if you all don't mind doing that, and if you don't want to, it's not a problem. Tonight, we're going to think about this switched on and often distracted world, how we got here, why that matters, and what it's doing to us. And then we're going to talk through some strategies for you guys to start to work out how you can make sure that your technology is enhancing your lives rather than overwhelming you. I want just to take a moment to think about this switched on culture that we're all living in and share some stats with you all. So the average iPhone is unlocked. We're not brand loyal at Shine Offline. There was some research in 2016 which said it was 80 times a day. But then another bit of research last year came out, and it looked at the number of mobile device-related actions carried out in 24 hours. So that was every time the person touched, tapped, or swiped their phone. And the average was 2,617. 1 in 3 of us are checking for messages in the middle of the night. Any phantom vibrations? I thought it was just me. This is a thing. where you think your phone has rung or vibrated, you check it, no one loves you. 9 out of 10 people have experienced this. Also, 55% of us are looking at our phones within 15 minutes of waking up, and checking our phones is often the first thing we do in the morning and the last thing we do at night. Ordnance Survey carried out research a couple of years ago where they asked people what were the skills they considered essential for modern day life. And the fascinating thing about this list is only one is not to do with being online, which is number 7. Being able to turn your water off at the mains, which I still can't do. Adam Alter is a business psychologist, and he wrote a book called Irresistible, which was out last year, and it's all about our connected lives and why we're so hooked to our devices. And I wanted to share this graph of his with you all. So this is the average 24-hour working day 3 times in history. 2007 was the year that the smartphone was launched, 2015, and then the data from 2017 is from April of last year. So the amount of time that we sleep, work and commute hasn't really changed. Survival, again, it's not changed. These are the basic things we all need to do, like eat, wash, look after our children if we're parents. They've all stayed the same. Now, this white space is our personal time. This is the sweet stuff. This is where we develop our intimate relationships, where we get into flow, where we do our hobbies. And the red is screen time. So in 2007, about half of that time was spent in front of a screen. And then in 2015, that had increased quite a lot. And then in April of last year, the vast majority of that time was spent in front of a screen. So this little slither of yellow is where your individuality lives, where your emotionality lives. Adam Alter says it's where your humanity lives. And I think it's really interesting to see how nothing else has really changed, but with smartphone technology coming in, there's been a massive change in that. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where in autumn's 2016's the statement in the Commons, 42 of the MPs were on their smartphones during the main address? Well, at Shine Offline, we believe that there are 4 reasons, and the first one is the speed and the growth of the technology. So all of this happened in just over 20 years. And now, since 2007, the majority of us own a smartphone, and it's now by apps. A lot of us are managing our personal and working lives through the apps that we use. Secondly, there are no guidelines, and we've got Homer here with his junk food because we would draw a parallel with our relationships with food. For a lot of us, that can be really complex. And many years ago, the government recognised that heart disease, obesity, cancer, etc. were all on the increase. And there was a correlation between poor diet and lack of awareness around eating well and looking after your body and these illnesses. So we now know 5 a day, low salt, low sugar. This technology is amazing. But it's been handed to us, and at no point has anybody said, oh, you might struggle when it comes to making sure that you use it in a balanced and controlled way. If you're a parent, it can maybe be easier to put some controls in place for your kids, but maybe not as easy for yourself. Thirdly, this technology is incredibly addictive. And nomophobia is a real phobia, which is no mobile phone phobia. The feeling of stress or anxiety that somebody experiences when they can't access their mobile phone. And London's first technology addiction clinic opened up in 2009, which was 2 years after the smartphone was launched. And this isn't just about teenage boys gaming. This is about executives who don't know how to disconnect from work and are spending all their time in front of screens and the impact that that's having on them. If you think about it, an awful lot of our online behaviour, say social media and gaming, for example, are based on a reward system. You know, you're getting points, you're getting likes. So that makes it really irresistible to resist for us all. And it's tested in Silicon Valley by millions of users. Users being the term that's used to describe the consumer of 2 industries, drugs and technology. Also, there's science behind the addictive aspects of our online lives, and it's all to do with dopamine, which is the hormone that's released. It's like a reward from the body. Your brain will spurt a bit of dopamine. And dopamine's released whenever you smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol and gamble. And what they found is that dopamine's released whenever you engage in online activity. So that's part of the reason why when you get a Facebook like or an email or a text, it feels really good. That's a dopamine. And dopamine also has a numbing effect on us as well. So that's why for a lot of us, when we're feeling irritated or overwhelmed or stressed out, we're turning to our devices for that numb from the dopamine. Finally, we're all being seduced. Hopefully, most of you recognise what movie. This is my father's favourite film, The Graduate. In a world where information is so abundant and our time is so finite, our attention has become the greatest commodity. So these days, whole industries are built on getting our attention and converting that attention into cash. It's all about advertising revenue. So what that effectively means is that every single website and app that you use, doesn't matter what it is, could be Guardian, it could be a poker game, a fitness app, they've all got the same intention: to hook you back in, to get you to come back and to spend longer there. And now they're using algorithms and analytics so that what you see on your screen is tailored for you as an individual, which makes it truly irresistible and really seductive. These are just some of the ways that the sector, that our tech hooks us back in. So now I'm going to turn over to you guys. And what I want you to do is, using those wee cards that you've got, I want you to take a couple of minutes in a pair or a three, whatever is most natural, whatever way you're sitting, to think about the good and bad things about your devices in your life. And write down a couple of good things and maybe a couple of not so good things. Talk about it in your group. And then I'll give you 2 minutes, and then we'll come together and we'll share what we've come up with. So I'll give you 2 minutes to do that now, and write it down on your little cards. Well, at Shine Offline, we believe that there are 4 big impacts. A lot of us are increasingly distracted. We're disconnected from the people we're in front of. We're overwhelmed by all this information that's constantly coming our way. And the lack of space and pause in our days is having a negative impact on our ability to tap into our truly creative and innovative part. So I'm going to touch on each of those now. So a lot of us are distracted, and that's having an impact on our attention spans. Dory's in her inbox. These days, there's this feeling like you're constantly multitasking because you're flitting on and off technology all day, at work, for example. So it feels like it's taking longer to get things done. This sense that somebody's constantly tapping you on the shoulder, you're being interrupted all of the time. Can anybody relate to this cartoon? I've never ended up on that particular page, but I can certainly relate to Monday morning, an extra wine on Sunday night. I don't want to engage my brain. It's much easier to keep refreshing my inbox or get lost in the rabbit hole of the internet because it's never ending. And once you're in, you could get lost down there. In November, there was a blog written on the Bank of England's blog by a strategist called Dan Nixon. And he claimed in this blog that there was a crisis of attention and that it was having a massive impact, a negative impact on the UK economy. And he boiled it right down to the rise in smartphones correlating with the decrease in productivity. And he said the two things were totally correlated. So for that to be written on the Bank of England's blog, I think is quite fascinating. Secondly, a lot of us are feeling disconnected, and it's having an impact on our relationships, both in work and in our personal lives. So emails replaced conversation for years, but nowadays, one of the benefits of a new job is your smartphone. We're given it as part of our work, and it's brilliant. But it means that work is encouraging us also to keep communicating in a non-verbal way. Companies are using WhatsApp, Slack. London Ambulance actually use Facebook as their internal communications tool. So the ability to be able to form those relationships through common face-to-face dialogue, which is really important. It's not there in the same way as it used to be. And in meetings, whenever you go into a meeting at work, it's normal these days to take all your technology in with you, and that can be brilliant because it can complement the meeting. You can refer back to something that's being talked about. But a lot of people will report that there's a disconnect and there's a bit of suspicion. You know, is he looking at something that's related to what I'm saying, or is he on Facebook? And what does that do to those relationships at work? And also, whenever you go to put the kettle on in the office, to have a break, to catch up with a colleague, you know, we all drink tea still, but a lot of us take our devices with us everywhere we go. So it means that the ability to have that intimate moment with that, you know, those of us who work spend more time at work than we do doing anything else. And the relationships that we develop at work are really important on a personal level, but also for the success of the business. But arguably, they're not having the chance to develop in the same way because of the technology that's in our hands. And then in our personal lives, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to times in your own life where you're maybe on the sofa in the evening with your partner, or you're out for dinner with friends. Somebody in a session last year said knife, fork, phone is a normal place setting these days. You're basically sharing the environment with the device, but you're getting pulled away from the people you're with because of it. And Deloitte have done some research that's shown that 1 in 3 of us have argued with our partner about excessive mobile phone usage. And I love the analogy, when you're at a party, I go to kids' parties, but back when you used to go to proper parties, and you were chatting to somebody and they were totally looking over your shoulder and you sense that somebody more interesting had come in the room. Well, the modern day equivalent of that is when you're in a conversation with somebody and the phone goes off and they're kind of listening to you, but they're sort of not really there, and they're, yeah. And continuous partial attention is what psychologists are calling it these days. A lot of us have a little bit of our brain always on our devices because we know it could go off at any time and we don't know what it's going to be. And what impact does that have on that relationship with that person that we're talking to, and how does it make them feel? Then there's an overwhelm and an overload, as somebody said, that's having a negative impact on our well-being, our mental health. It's a 24/7 world that we live in, and for a lot of us, from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep at night, we're connected through our devices. And I believe that work interrupts our personal tech more than ever because of the technology that we're using, that we can carry around in our pockets and handbags. You're on an awful lot of the time these days, and the opportunity for downtime to rest and rejuvenate is getting smaller and smaller. Your body might be in Ibiza, but your head could be back in the office because oh God, if I don't go in and clear my inbox every day, I'm going to have 500 emails waiting for me whenever I get back. But also that curiosity, I wonder what's there, what's going on in that project that's happening while I'm away that I've been involved in. The Chartered Institute of Management carried out research a couple of years ago where they found out that 80% of managers were spending so much time on their work email out of office hours that they were effectively cancelling out their annual leave. It was totaling 29 days when they added up the commute, the evening, the weekend, and then their actual holidays. So if we don't get a break from our work, we're burning out, and burnout is at an all-time high. At Shine Offline, we work with a consultant psychiatrist called Dr. Ian Drever, and Ian specialises in working with blue chips. And he says he sees the number of executives coming through the door who have panic disorder, sleep disorder, anxiety disorder, relationships breaking down, and he puts it all down to technology. Our brains haven't evolved in 5,000 years, and yet the amount of information that we're processing as human beings these days is completely unbelievable, and it's having a negative impact on a lot of us. There was a piece of research carried out, again, by one of the big banks a couple of years ago, where they put wrist monitors on 550 of their city workers, and they were monitoring their heart rates for spikes in stress. And what the study found was that the spikes in stress were much greater in the evening than they were through the whole day at work. And the conclusion of the study was this was to do with the fear or the actuality of being interrupted in your personal time, by work whenever you're in your personal time. We wouldn't take our children to work. Remember that BBC video with this man on the Skype call and his children came in the back? You know, you wouldn't take your children to work because it'd be a nightmare. And yet a lot of us take our work back home and expect it not to stress us out, but of course it does. Also these days, the way that a lot of us unwind involves screens, and that Adam Alter graph beautifully shows how the vast majority of our personal time is being spent in front of a screen. So, for example, if you're the sort of person who's really good at taking a lunch break at work and you step away from the desk and you go away somewhere for 20 minutes, a lot of us are spending that on our devices, on Facebook or Instagram or BBC News. So we're not actually getting a break from the screen. We're not looking up. We're not taking in our surroundings, our environment, really tasting our food and connecting with the people around us. And also, whenever we go on holiday, I remember when you booked a week in Mallorca, and the only way you knew what was happening back in the UK was if you stumbled across a shop that sold the Sun or the Daily Mail. Well, these days, thanks to Vodafone's free roaming, doesn't matter where you are. You could be lying on the beach in the Canary Islands, never mind the inbox, Oh, we'll just see what's happening to BBC News. Donald Trump is still a blank. What does that do? It pulls us out of the oasis of our holiday. Holidays are about getting off that hamster wheel of normal, everyday, stressful life and creating an oasis for ourselves. But that's getting interrupted by our screens an awful lot of the time. Finally, the lack of space and pause in our days is having a negative impact on our ability to be truly creative. If you think of your brain, it's kind of like a muscle. You can change your brain depending on how you use it. The term is neuroplasticity. And these days, what a lot of us do is we train our minds in distraction by constantly flitting on and off our technology. And this exercise is the fast-paced reactionary part of our brains. But what's getting neglected is the slow, long-form, contemplative, creative thinking sides of the brain. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Steve Jobs may have given us all the iPad, but he never let his kids have one. And Silicon Valley executives send their children to schools with no Wi-Fi. And the reason for this is because the creators and innovators of this amazing technology know that if you don't have a healthy handle on it, it can be quite dangerous. I've got a quote from Steven Spielberg. Technology can be your best friend, or it can be the biggest party pooper of your life. It interrupts our own story, interrupts the ability to have a thought or a daydream, to imagine something truly wonderful, because we're too busy bridging the walk between the cafe to the office on our smartphone. Also, for as long as time has been, the world's greatest creatives have known, in order to tap into really that proper flow part of yourself, we need solitude. And although you might feel like you spend time alone these days, waiting for your friend going to the loo in the pub, or waiting for the doctor, or in the queue at the supermarket, or on the commute, a lot of us spend that time on our devices. So we're not having that proper brain space and that pause that we all need as humans. Social media. So social media is an amazing way. The vast majority of us are using it these days, and it's a great way to connect and find support and share life's brilliant experiences. But I believe it can be at the heart of the distraction and disconnect and overwhelm that people can feel. Disconnect when your online lives and your friends' through social media pages are maybe taking up more time and energy than face-to-face contacts. Feelings of low self-esteem when you compare yourself to your online friends and these amazingly created lives that they all seem to be leading. Studies are coming out to show that mood actually goes down following using social media. And the founders of social media are starting to come out now to talk about the potentially negative impact that it could be having on us all. So that's Sean Parker from Facebook. He's just one of the people from the sector who has come out to the guy, I don't know if anybody saw in The Guardian, at the end of last year, the guy who invented the Facebook like button has now gone to the other side, and he says that there needs to be an accountability within the sector. It's manipulative and seductive, and people don't understand what's happening to them. The CEO of Apple spoke at a school in London, I think it was the start of this year, where he said that he thinks schools need to be very mindful of the amount of technology that they put into the classroom, and that he doesn't want his nephew on social media. So for Shine Offline, this is very exciting, because we knew that the day would come when the sector would realise that they did have to have an accountability, and that things can change from the top. We also believe that social media is a big reason why smartphones can infiltrate life's great moments. Does anybody remember when you went to a gig and it looked like this on the left, and you didn't spend the whole time either catching it on your own phone so you could own it or share it with the world, or watch it on the screen of the person in front of you? There's a psychologist in America called Sherry Turkle, and she writes about this whole area. And she says at the heart of our culture these days is the phrase, "I share, therefore I am." In order to actually exist, you can't experience something for yourself anymore. You've got to capture it and share it with the world. But there are other things that we don't do the way we used to pre-smartphone. A lot of us don't have a proper break away from work to really chill out, relax our heads, and get back to work rested and rejuvenated and ready to go because we've had a proper holiday. This is about being out in nature and connecting with the world around us, but also about whenever we're exercising, not becoming overly reliant on the technology that we're using while we're exercising to tell us that we've got to run a bit further or go a bit faster or take some more steps. By tuning into our bodies and listening to our biology. One of the oldest and simplest ways that we can come together as a community, breaking bread around a table, sharing stories. You've had a brilliant day at work, you've had a rubbish day at work. Coming together, looking into each other's eyes, laughing, crying, and really connecting. And those important people and those important times that we are never going to get back. Letting that person in that moment know, I'm here with you and you have my attention and you're important to me, you matter. And I'm not distracted or disconnected from you. And how important that is for that person and for that relationship. So, what is the answer? Well, what we find is when we do this workshopping and we ask people what do they love about their phone and what do they not love about their phone, people love the functionality of the device because that's what it was built to do, to make our lives easier. But what people aren't too keen on is the emotionality around it, how it makes them feel, the impact that it has on their relationships. So what we need to do is maximise all of this stuff and manage or minimise all of this. And I'm not sure if anybody here can relate to one of two camps that you can fall into if you feel like you don't have balance and control when it comes to your relationship with your device. The first camp is the demonisation camp. Oh, this is a nightmare, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have to chuck it in the drawer for the weekend and have a detox. And I get introduced as a digital detox expert all of the time, but I'm not a digital detox expert because I do not believe that that is the answer. I would draw another parallel to food, our relationship with food. So say you're feeling really bloated and you think a juicing weekend in Dorset is just what I need. And you go off for the weekend, train back on Sunday night feeling amazing, and you skip into work on Monday morning on it, and you have a chocolate croissant and a double creamy latte for your breakfast. You haven't actually looked at what's causing the behaviour, what's underlying it. So for that reason, we don't believe that digital detox is the answer. The other camp that people can fall into is a head in the sand, go with the flow. Well, this is the world I live in, and I'm reliant on my technology. I need it to do my job. I need it to manage my social life. It's getting bigger and greater and faster, and I'm becoming more dependent on it, and it's just me. What am I meant to do about it? And at Shine Offline, we have a different approach. We believe that this technology is amazing, and we do need it to live and work these days. But it's about having a more mindful and balanced approach when it comes to technology. Bringing some consciousness to your own relationship with it, working out where it causes you stresses and strains, and making small changes so that you can make sure that those stresses are minimised. And it's effectively about removing the autopilot. Because these days, it's an auto-response. This is Airplane, by the way, in case anybody didn't know. It's an auto-response. You know, a moment of downtime, you turn to your phone. A moment of irritation, you turn to your phone. It's constant because it is addictive and it is habitual. So it's about bringing some consciousness to that behaviour so that we can start to make some changes. Now, at Shine Offline, we're all about tools and tips. So I want to share a few things with you now, things that we've come up with, things that already exist that you can start to experiment with to see if you can get a bit more balance and control into your life. And the first one, which is very close to Action for Happiness's heart, is mindfulness. So, does anybody not know what mindfulness is? Does anybody practice mindfulness regularly? Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I'll just give you a very brief overview. It's got loads of benefits. It's basically a practice that allows you to build your capacity to choose where you want to place your attention. It's all about being in the present moment, being here now. And it's no coincidence that with the rise in mobile technology, there's been a massive rise in mindfulness. Because our mobile phones pull us out of the moment all of the time. Every time they ping, we're out of what we're doing. And mindfulness harnesses the moment and gets us to focus on being here in the moment. So some trainers would call it brain training. I said earlier on that your brain is like a muscle. You can mould and change your brain depending on how you use it. And Buddhist monks go through brain scanners, and their brains are very different to ours because they meditate on a regular basis. So it's essentially a workout for your mind, and you're exercising your attention muscle. So you find something to focus on, and normally when you start off, that's your breath. You close your eyes, you don't have to, but if you want to focus a bit more, and you find your breath wherever it's most obvious, your nose, your throat, your chest, your tummy, and you in and out, you breathe, focus on the breath, and your mind wanders. Oh, my mind's wandered, bring it back. Mind wanders, because it's meant to wander, bring it back. And that's mindfulness, the bringing back, the returning back. The returning back with kindness rather than going, oh, come back to my breath, which is what you would naturally do as a human. So when I first started to practice mindfulness, for me, it allowed me to put my phone down, which was very important at the time, and immerse myself in some space and pause. And I find that the more that I practice, the less ruminating I do and the less stressed I feel. Now, I'm not a mindfulness teacher. We work with a mindfulness teacher at Shine Offline, and it is an abstract concept, and some of you do practice, but I want to do a little exercise with you all. So, if anybody came to see Ruby Wax, she may have done this because this is who I stole it from. If you all want to stand up, and if everybody puts their arms out in front of them, hands parallel, don't hit anyone, if possible. And after 3, I'm going to ask you to clap your hands once as hard as you can and then put them back in position. After 3. 1, 2, 3. Feel the burn? In your palm? On your fingers? So that was a mindful moment. Thank you for doing that. That was a mindful moment. Bringing your attention to something. Pain is a very easy place to bring your attention to. You wouldn't meditate like that because that would be hideous. But Ruby Wax did that in the Richmond Theatre. Anna and I went to see her, and she got the whole of the Richmond Theatre standing up and then meditating, which was amazing. So that's mindfulness. There are apps you can download to your phone to help you meditate. And Headspace is one that I'm sure a lot of you know. I went through a phase of using Calm, which was created by the guy who invented Mushy Monsters and has now gone to the other side. It set you a little reminder every morning, a little mindfulness phrase to remind you to meditate. So there are some other apps that you can download to your phone to help you manage your relationship with your phone. And I'm going to just talk about 3 that we like at Shine Offline now. So the first one is Off Time. And this allows you to block distractions for an allocated amount of time, but you can customize it. So say you're meeting an old friend for lunch, or you've got a deadline and you want to turn your phone off for an hour, but you're a parent and your children, you want your kids' school to get through, or your mum's not well and you want her to be able to ring you. You can set it so that those 2 numbers can still get through. Or say you're commuting home and you really want to turn your phone off, but you want to listen to a podcast. Again, you can set the off time so that one thing still works. You're using the phone the way you want to use it. And then Pocket is a filing system for online content. So say you're at work and you come across a funny video, but you don't want to watch it now. You effectively can put it in the Pocket and then watch it later, offline or online. You can do that with any content that you come across online. And then Forest is kind of like off time. So you want to go offline for an hour, for example, and you set the app for 60 minutes. And it will disable the device, and it will plant a little tree. And then over the hour, the tree will grow. But say after 25 minutes, you're like, I've got to go on my phone. The tree will wither and die. And the more you use the app, the more trees get planted, and you eventually end up with a forest. But the really cool thing is that the developers of this app, you accrue points through using the app, and they're planting trees in the real world. So we're putting something back to nature by having a healthy relationship with our devices. So they're the apps. We're based in Twickenham, and we have been developing some highly sophisticated tools in our highly sophisticated lab, which I brought some of them with me tonight to share with you all. Now, some of these will blow your mind. The first one you'll never have seen before, but it's fine. Nobody generally recognises this. Has anybody ever seen one of these? This is an alarm clock. It's meant to make you up in the morning. Who uses their phone as their alarm? Okay, so you're normal, because about 80% of people use their phone as their alarm clock. So why is that a problem? So it's Tuesday morning, 10 to 7, phone goes off. You haven't put your toe on the floor, and you're in your work email. And that horrible man from that horrible department has sent you a response. Or Donald Trump, BBC News, he's still a bing. Or that woman on Instagram is putting more photos up that are clearly airbrushed. You haven't even got out of bed, and you've created the tone of your morning by turning on the device because it's sitting there beside you. So we would say bring some consciousness to that, get the phone out of the bedroom, charge it downstairs offline, have a central point in the house, get yourself an alarm clock or a small child, remove the temptation. Don't get a child that wakes at 20 to 5. Nightmare. Okay. This is a hooter. And this hooter is meant to represent notifications. So, you're at work and you're on deadline, you've got loads of meetings, but your sofa that you bought on eBay before they became affiliated with Homebase, auction ends today. Bids are going crazy and you're under pressure. But every time somebody looks at it, this thing's going off and it's just going off constantly. And that's really annoying. You can turn it off. You can turn off, your apps are set to notify you, but you can go in and turn those notifications off, which means Facebook's a great example. People will contact us afterwards and say, all I did was turn the Facebook notifications off my phone, and within 24 hours, my life was completely different, because I was choosing when I was going to go in, as opposed to the device pulling me in all the time. This one will blow your mind. This is a pouch. And this is about out of sight, out of mind. So it's been proven that putting your phone on flight mode or turning it off, but still being able to see it, that it's still a distraction. So this is about creating a physical barrier. So get yourself a pouch, get yourself a sock, doesn't really matter what it is, and just get it out of the way. It's like the clear glass jar of biscuits sitting in the kitchen on the side. You're more likely to have one than you are if it's in a tin at the back of the cupboard. So create a physical barrier and remove the temptation. This is a cup, and it says, tea is better with time offline. And I say, have a break, have a Kit Kat. We're not sponsored by Nestle, we should be. This is about cues in your day. What are the things that you do every day that you could start to play with? Well, every time I drink 25 cups of tea a day, so every time I go to put the kettle on, I'm going to put my phone in flight mode, stick it in the drawer in the cupboard, and just enjoy my tea, taste my tea, connect with my colleague, have a moment to myself, get some headspace. What are the other things that you do every day that you could start to experiment with shining offline? This one saved my life, which sounds really melodramatic, but it's true. This is a pad of paper and a pen. This is called a smart pad because it's the same size as a phone, but then they changed the phones and it's not the same. Anyway. I realised when I hit my low point that every time it occurred to me that I needed to do something that involved me going onto my phone, I would do it there and then. So I would be having my lunch or at work or talking to my friend, whatever it was I was doing, and, oh, I've got to do that thing. Oh, I've got to do it. And it was constant all day, on and off like a yo-yo, and I did my own head in. So I got myself a pad and a pen, and every time one of those thoughts came to me, I wrote it down. I took this with me everywhere. I wrote it down, and I wrote it down. And then at a few points in the day, I would action the list. It's called batch working. It's an old time management thing. There's no reason why we can't do it with our devices. Take away that flitting on and off all day. And my last tool, is it a tool or a tip? It's hard to say. Is a toilet roll. Who takes their phone into the toilet? Action for happiness. Who takes their phone into the toilet? Thank you. This is the UK's biggest taboo, and Anna and I are definitely going to get some media coverage about it, because I've asked about 3,000 people that question now, and nobody admits to it, generally, until you encourage them. So it's not just about the loo, it's about offline places in your world. Where are the places where you could start to experiment with not having your phone with you? So the meeting room, businesses we work with come back to us and say we're now screen-free meeting rooms, and we're getting more done, and there's a much better atmosphere in the room. The sofa in the evening with your partner. People say, oh, we sit and watch something every night, but we're both on our phones the whole time. Let's get rid of the phones and actually don't talk to each other, because that's weird. But let's just connect through watching the thing that we're actually watching together. The play park with your kids, the car. We shouldn't be on our phones in the car anyway, because it's illegal now. I actually saw a guy, I told this story in a corporate room one day and sort of laughed, and they didn't think it was funny, but I basically saw a man, I saw him on his phone, and then he drove into the back of a lorry a couple of months ago. So we're not meant to be on the phones anyway. So what are the places in your world where you could start to experiment with shining offline? Just as we finish, I want to just share a couple of things that you need to bear in mind, because this is the way the world looks, and it's really hard to make these changes. So the first one is to be mindful of how this technology impacts different people in different ways. We all have different sensitivities to it. So that's not just about thinking about the impact that your behaviour on your smartphone has on the person that you're with, but it's also about the impact that your communication has, the person that you're sending it to. So the example that I normally give when I'm in a business setting is if you've had a really busy day at work and you're catching up with emails in the evening and you're firing off a load of emails at like 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you don't intend for anybody to reply, but that's a grey area. And people are then responding, and it's creating this culture of sort of people don't really know if they're meant to respond or not. So just, you could always do the emails and put them into your drafts and then automate them to go out the next morning at 9:15, 9 o'clock or whatever. The next slide is my favourite slide in the presentation. I think it's funny. This isn't just about kids. I think the times in this world where you choose not to take your phone out are very powerful. And there's a ripple effect to behaviours. And you see it all the time, especially on trains, where there are a couple of people commuting together or just travelling together, and one of their phones will go off, and the person's phone will come out, and within 30 seconds, the other person's on their phone as well, and the rest of the journey is spent with the two people on their phones. So it's just being conscious of the impact that your behaviour has on the world around you. And also to remember that we're all only human, and this stuff is really hard. So remember that it's difficult to make changes, and be kind to yourself. And if you have an intention that you can't stick to, that's fine. It's all about experimentation and bringing a bit of curiosity to it. If you end up on Facebook, on the loo, at 2 in the morning, there's always tomorrow. I work with this every day of my life, and it ebbs and it flows, and it depends on how tired I am, how stressed I feel. I basically came off social media, and my big pull now is my inbox. And if I'm waiting on something important to come back to me, the pull to my inbox is overwhelming. So what I've done now, I'll just give you what I've done personally, is I have a work phone and a personal phone. I don't have email on my phone, because if I did, I'd be on it all day, checking. I wear a watch, because I realised that I was going, oh, I wonder what time it is, I better look at my phone, as an excuse to check my phone all the time. I have 2 small children, one of who wakes very early. My biggest piece of advice to anybody who struggles with their email management is I recently read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And the whole book is about the fact that we're so distracted all the time these days, we never get the chance to get into a place of deep concentration. And it's all evidence-based writing. It's an amazing book. He's got a TED Talk as well. And what I've now decided to do is I try not to go into my inbox before 11 o'clock in the morning, which means that I spend the first 2.5 hours on focused work. And then I'll go into my inbox for 45 minutes to an hour twice a day. So nobody's ever waiting to hear back from me for longer than 3 to 4 hours, which I think is pretty acceptable. And I'm not just I was just driven out of my work all of the time. My head was all over the place, and my overwhelm and panic attacks were really, it's what basically brought me down. So that's my top tip for tonight. Good luck. We normally contact all our workshop participants a week after with a little momentum boosting email. So Mark said that could come from Action for Happiness in a week or so. And thanks for listening. Thanks for the dental floss, and good luck shining offline.
Laura, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. We've got time for questions, folks. There's loads of stuff to come up here. I'd like to sort of start with a reflection, which is we've done loads of events in this room, and not many speakers have said, let's all turn our devices off. And I was planning to tweet and Instagram the hell out of this all the way through, and then obviously you invited us to turn off, and I actually found a real sense of connecting differently with content, having, sat here and thinking that I'm always listening to the great speakers. So that was an interesting observation. I was one of the people who sheepishly put my hands up when you raised the toilet roll, because I do find that sometimes when I go away to the loo or something, I will use that as a space. And I realise, why is that? I've for years been really aware of the impact of not wanting to be staring at a screen when I'm with my kids. So if I'm at home and I think, I do need to check on what's going on, I will consciously go, I will try to not do that in the room where they are. I remember the time my little boy came up to me once and going, Daddy, I found your phone. Like it was like the thing I treasured most in the world. And I'm like, I don't care about the phone, I care about you. But obviously the impression you've got is this thing matters. So what's your view on that, knowing that you do want to interact with technology and then going, well, I'm going to take myself away from people so it's not in your face, I'm ignoring you. Is that a sensible strategy, or is that just compounding the problem? I
think, for me, what came up there automatically was another food comparison. Yeah. So, you really want a McDonald's, but you don't want to eat it in front of your kids, so you go and have it in the toilet.
Yeah.
This technology...
Really good,
do you know what I mean, though? This technology is in our world, and we need it, and our children are growing up with it. And I think it's like food if you demonise it for them. So what I do... Now, my kids are only 5 and 20 months, but I'll basically explain what I'm doing if I need to do something in front of them. A friend recently said to me that they think that there's something very secretive about a smartphone. But if you open up a laptop, it doesn't feel so hidden. So that's what she does in front of her daughter. If she needs to check something online, she'll actually go into the laptop, because this all feels a little bit, I don't know. So I think we need to be as open as we can with our children, and it's about having a healthy, sustainable relationship with it. So hiding away in the loo, even if you kind of are hiding because you don't want to do it in front of them. Whereas a lot of other people will say, the loo's the only place I get to go on my phone because my children are everywhere. I'm never on my own otherwise. So it depends on what suits you as an individual as well,
Thank you. So let's get to some other questions. So I'm going to say a show of hands of who's interested in asking something. We've got some microphones, so can you wait for a mic to turn? Let's start here, Jane, and then we'll come to one of these here.
Well, I suppose anecdotally, really, is the research that we've included, and we've read so much research. It took us about a year to develop this workshop. So the amount of research that's out there is phenomenal. The Deloitte stuff we've sort of honed in on. Anecdotally, we know, because we've now workshopped with thousands of people, people will always come up to us at the end of a session of all ages, sharing their stories of the negative impact that it's having specifically on marriages. People don't tend to talk about friendships or siblings, but I have people coming up to me saying, my wife's a GP and she doesn't even need to use her work email, and she's still addicted to her phone. And when we went on honeymoon, there was no Wi-Fi, and she had a panic attack within the first half hour. I've had a woman in her late 60s at a big corporate saying, since my husband retired, he doesn't know what to do with himself, and he's become addicted to his device. And it's embarrassing, because whenever we go out with our friends for dinner, he's on his phone constantly. So I can't get any research. There's no research at the front of my mind, but I know from talking to people that it's causing a lot of stresses and strains for a lot of people. And I think that's because people aren't thinking about their behaviour. This is the way the world looks, and people just aren't conscious of the impact that this very innocent interest has on the person that they're with. So it's just really experience of speaking to workshop participants that I can draw upon at the moment. But it's certainly something that people... The other thing we do is at the end of every workshop, we normally give out a little feedback card. And at the bottom, it's a few tick boxes on how empowered people feel to make changes. And then there's a little comment section at the bottom where we ask people, what's the biggest thing you took out of the session today? And we get a lot of people saying, the impact this is having on my relationships, the impact this is having on my relationship with my children. I want to bring some change so that I can set a good example for them, but also improve the time that I have with them, because I know that I'm distracted. So we know from the people that we're working with that it's certainly an issue.
There's a fascinating thing about human attention, which is that when you're with someone and they're staring at their device, it's very visceral. You get a sense of, I'm being ignored here. But when you're focused on your device, you're not really aware of what's going on, so you just don't feel that sense. I kind of feel that if we all saw ourselves and could see a video of how we were looking at something when our kids were trying to get our attention or our partner was, we'd be much more aware of it, but we lack that empathy. So there's another question, lady down here. Thank you. Jake.
Hey, I just wondered if you had any thoughts, anything to offer on setting expectations with the people in your life on how you're going to... Because it's hard enough to make the changes in terms of what you feel to do, but then if you've already created expectation, I feel anxiety that if I think, right, well, I'm only going to look at WhatsApp, once a day, I'm concerned that the people that are used to hearing me, respond to them quite quickly, and then, are going to be like, well, where's she gone?
Well, I would tell them. How many people is it? Is it hundreds of people that you're communicating through WhatsApp on? I think if you share what you're trying to do and the improvements that you're trying to make, then they'll understand why you've suddenly gone AWOL. For me, with my inbox, I was never really the sort of person who responded straight away because I was trying to manage expectations, but I still responded pretty quickly. And now in my signature, I've actually written, I look at my inbox twice a day. It's changed my life. If you need me, call me. So people know that they won't hear back from me straight away. And I think as I make new professional partnerships moving forward, and that's the norm then for those people, then that will become the expectation. Because I know people who don't email back straight away, and it's fine, because that's the way they deal with it. I know people who don't respond to a WhatsApp straight away, and that's fine. I don't worry about them, but other people who do, and if they didn't, I would think, oh my God, they're dead. So honestly, you would. So I think it's just communicating your change to people. And just letting them know what you're doing and the experiment that you're maybe undergoing.
And I've received those emails from Laura, having emailed her recently, and experienced that sense of, it's nice to just know where you stand, and it feels completely natural. Yeah, it's great. The gentleman with the jumper on here, thanks.
Thanks very much, that was a really interesting talk. I try quite consciously to not get my phone out when I'm out at dinner with people and things like that, and not even have it on the table. I get the impression perhaps you are a lady who does similar. Do you try and encourage your friends and dinner dating type people to put their phones away? Do you tut? Do you roll your eyes? Do you ask them politely? Or do you do none of those and do the classic?
If anybody wants to babysit, then I can go out for dinner. I don't really go out for dinner at the moment, but I've been asked that question a couple of times. By people within a professional setting. Do you worry when you're on your phone that people are going to... But I think we're quite clear in our messaging. This isn't about not engaging with your device. It's about just bringing some consciousness to your behaviour. So, no, to be honest, I'm not too concerned with how people view me, really. And I don't tell people what to do, but the joy for me is that people know that this is what I do for work. Like, I remember meeting somebody and them saying, I was coming on thinking, I better not take my phone out. I better not be on the table, and I don't mind. Whatever, it's about you. It's not about me. Well, it's slightly about me because the impact it's going to have on our interaction, but I'm certainly not, oh dear, or, But if anybody wants to babysit, I'll give you my number at the end.
I didn't think we were particularly good at this with our family, but I was abroad with my mum and dad and my kids last summer, and we were looking at this like by the sea, and my mum, who's reasonably tech savvy but quite new to some of this stuff, got her phone out, and my little girl said, "Grandma, we don't use our screens at the table," and she was like, "Oh!" I'm like, "Good for you, that was great." This lady here with the green top on, and then let's take one from the back row afterwards. Jade, if you go to that gentleman at the back. Was there a question here as well? Because I was pointing at the one behind you, Jake, on the left there. Oh, sorry. Thank you. And then Jade would take the question at the back next. Thank you.
Hi. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about teenagers. I teach mindfulness to teenagers, and what I'm finding is that there's tremendous pressure to be on social media because of peers being there and fear of missing out and everything else. And I don't think they really see the benefit of getting offline. I think there's more benefit being online for them in terms of being included. I just wondered if you have any inspired thoughts about this.
We get asked about young people all the time, and our sort of stance on it is that we wanted to go out and talk to adults because it was coming from personal experience, and we hoped that by the parents changing their own behaviours, that learning would filter down through example setting for their kids. The teenage thing is really complex, and I've got a niece and nephew who are both teenagers, and they're on their devices all of the time. I'm not an expert in it at all, but there's a book that's been written by a girl who's in New York, and somebody sent me a blog post that she wrote last week that was all about her interaction with her teenage daughter, because she had a friend who was anorexic, and there were suicidal thoughts happening with another friend, and this woman knew that social media was having a really negative impact on her daughter. So if you email me, laura@shineoffline.com, I can forward you that, and it's really powerful. What she said to her, this woman's written a book all about this. She's based in the States, and what she said to her daughter and how she worded it, and it's written in a really sensible, beautiful way. So, because I'm not the expert in teenagers, not yet, mine are too small. But I'll send that through to you, and hopefully, and that might signpost you into some other stuff that she's written.
We had Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, the guy who's BBC's Doctor in the House, here for one of these events. And one of the things he said, he worked with a teenage boy who had real problems around having a difficult effect on his well-being. And the thing he said he started with was, let's just make sure in the first hour after you've woken up and the first hour before, or the last hour before you go to bed, if you can stop that being on time, that can be the really, really important first step. And he kind of, it's not disconnecting, it's not being away from your teenage relationships online, but it's just saying don't let it completely front end and back end your day, which I thought was quite a good first step, actually.
And I think that Sean Parker video is very powerful. I know Facebook isn't maybe being used by teenagers as much anymore, but the fact that people like him are coming out and saying, we don't know what this is doing to our children's brains, for any teenager to hear that, I think is pretty powerful.
And there's a question at the back of the room there on the left.
Yeah, just firstly on I've got 2 teenage boys. They don't look at email, they're not on WhatsApp, they don't talk on their phones. So it's a completely different world for them on their phones. The thing I was going to ask you was, something we have in my company is, I'm the CEO of the company, I don't let any communication to anyone who's on holiday. We're not allowed to. And we're not allowed to communicate with anyone who's on holiday. We encourage them to turn their phones off or not take their phones. And I just wondered in some of the conversations you're having with different companies, where you're seeing that happening more and more, where companies are stopping email either at a certain time at night or whether they're stopping them on holiday.
Yeah, when we first started this, it was all about individual empowerment. And Anna and I don't come from an HR, wellbeing, L&D background. And quite quickly, people started to say to us, oh, you could change the face of working culture within the UK. And we were like, oh, God. I was pregnant at the time. Oh, my God, really? But quite quickly, it's happened. And we have gone into some businesses who have booked us. Say, for example, somebody's seen me speak at a conference and has booked me in to go and do a workshop in the run-up to Christmas, because they're a food and drink business, and they know that their sales floor need to be on in October, November, December. So they got us in to basically workshop so that the sales floor understood the impact that effective break time was having on them, i.e. don't spend all your breaks on Facebook because it might put you in a bad mood, or BBC News because you need to get out and have some space, etc. They got us in specifically for that reason. So there's a very, very much a bottom line reason about that. And now that company have introduced flexible working, and they're using what we basically taught them within that workshop to create some boundaries for people about how they manage their inbox whenever they're doing flexible working. At a more senior level, we are working with companies now. This is a grey area, and it causes so much stress amongst people, because we all need our communications in order to do our jobs, and our businesses survive on that. But nobody's talking about this and the negative impact it's having on business and on individuals. And now we are starting to talk at boardroom level with businesses about deconstructing the attitudes and behaviours of their company at the moment when it comes to how they use the communications technology and the devices, working out where they want to get to, and then helping them to build some sort of plan and guidelines around what they expect. Because it is about that whole shutting down at the end of the day and having that pause at time to rest so you can come back to work better the next morning. But it's also about how you spend your day when you're at work. And a lot of people are either using their email in an ineffective way, because they're flitting on and off it all day, so they're never allowed to concentrate, but also not having proper breaks. So we've seen a change in the past 6 months where businesses really want to talk about this. Big corporate businesses, but also smaller SMEs, which is really exciting, because, you know, we can change individuals and empower people to make some choices for themselves, but if they're not supported by their bosses, then, you know, you can only go so far.
Great. So we did say we might run slightly beyond 8:30 this evening because there's obviously such a lot to talk about. Can I just see a sense of whether we have got some extra sort of burning questions people want to ask? Let's maybe just take 2 more. So we'll take this one down here from Calvin, and then the gentleman with the blue top over there, and then we'll wrap up. Just down here. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. I want to ask you something about what I've noticed since smartphones came along, especially since WhatsApp came along. And I've noticed nowadays that I never have an actual conversation with friends or family. It's always on WhatsApp. And I've tried to find a way of stopping that, but I just find if I call my friends, they don't answer. They'll send a WhatsApp message. Have you got any sort of ideas of how you can get around that?
WhatsApp's so brilliant because you can have a group conversation with people who are all over the place. So that is creating a conversation that we could never have had before. And I think the magic of that, you know, face-to-face is really hard. And Sherry Turkle's book talks about this a lot. The intimacy and the danger zone you go into when you actually engage in a conversation with somebody. The vulnerability that you have to show and the thinking on your feet. There's no prep. You can't think about the message and then write it. And I think that there's a safety blanket that a lot of people are using these days because they're hiding behind the tapping and the typing. And I can't stand up here and say, you need to do this because it's a big, you know, you need... There's a blog that I wrote when we first launched about why I did this, and whenever I first started to make some changes, I was still doing PR work, which is all about talk. Well, it should all be about talking, but it's not. It's about bloody emailing. But I remember I started picking up the phone to people, and they were like, "Why are you ringing me?" Because I was trying to get back to verbal communication, but it just didn't work. So I think small steps. Do what you can, and persist, but don't underestimate the power of that community and what that's creating, as well. It's a tough one. I don't have the answer.
What I like about what you're suggesting, Laura, is it's not all about, let's throw out the technology. It's like,
no, God,
let's find a way of using the amazing tools we've got in a more healthy way. I think that's a really good way of approach. Final question over here, then we've got a couple of little wrap-up announcements as well. Seems to have taken you by surprise that you're asking a question. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, thank you very much for all you said. Do you have any thoughts from your personal experience about etiquette with regard to use of phones in a context where one is actually with somebody? Because you've described what happens when people just get caught up in it, but do you have any thoughts or guidelines?
So when you feel that you need to engage with your device in front of someone?
I'm talking about etiquette, i.e. a sort of general understanding of what is good manners, what's considerate, what isn't, when the phone comes out.
So do you mean that you want to use it, or that the etiquette of the other person? Oh, right. I think you have to...
talk about on trains and other situations, dinner parties.
I think...
it seems to spoil potential human communication.
Yeah. I find that for me, leading by example and setting my own boundaries and trying to be good-mannered in how I use my device in front of people, hopefully holds up a mirror for them to then start to see how they should maybe engage with it as well. But it's kind of like any sort of social, it depends on the interaction, who you're with. But hopefully, if that relationship's important. The other thing is that this is a thing that people don't really talk about, and this is why we want to go out and talk about it, because we want people to start, I go for debrief meetings with clients and they go, I wasn't even thinking about what I was doing. And this is like the head of HR for a big corporate. And now I realise the impact my behaviour's had. People just aren't thinking about it. But I think the gentlest way to do it is by making changes yourself and modelling behaviour that the people around you can then hopefully see, oh, he's actually very well-mannered when it comes to his phone. I'm going to do that too. But again, it's a hard one.
It's contagion of the good behaviour, not of the
Exactly, yeah.
the other behaviour. Well, listen, Laura, that's been really brilliant to hear from you and to have the chance to ask you questions on. You've obviously given a lot of thought to this, what I think is a hugely important topic. What I'm really struck by, I loved it partly because I love the film Airplane, but that reference to the autopilot is really powerful because we spend a lot of our lives in this kind of just not very conscious way of living, doing things out of habit, doing things out of reactivity. And really what you're describing, all of this is about a bit of a more mindful relationship with everything we do, our habits. And because digital's become so big, we're sort of doing this stuff without thinking about it and just bringing you attention. Just by raising this topic for us, I think you've done us all a favour, and hopefully we can take some of these ideas out into the world. Who here will do something, whether it's even just a tiny thing, slightly differently, or give something a try as a result of this evening? So your work here is done. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Laura. It's been brilliant.